Hello and good morning once again. Thank you all for joining us. We have a nice big group here today and we're very excited. Today is navigating behavior expressions in persons with dementia. And we are very excited to bring this important topic to you today. As you may know, these complimentary webinars are brought to you through a collaboration of sponsorship with O'Connor Mortuary, Care Choices Hospice and Palliative Services, Caring Companions at Home, and of course, us here at Alzheimer's Orange County. My name is Melissa Klabe. I'm the Director of Education here at Alzheimer's Orange County, and I will be your host today because your regular host, Kim Bailey, is our presenter today. We're very excited about that. Our sponsors are providing these webinars to you as a service to the community on topics beneficial for anyone who cares for or works with older adults, and we do hope you find today's presentation informative and useful. And so with all that said, it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, the lovely Kim Bailey. Kim Bailey is a gerontologist and has worked in the field as a lecturer and healthcare professional for over 30 years. She is our program and education specialist here at Alzheimer's Orange County, where she coordinates the early memory loss and connect to culture programs and provides educational instruction for families, clinical staff, and our greater community. As a former adjunct faculty professor, Ms. Bailey taught at California State University Fullerton and Vanguard University. She's also served as a corporate gerontologist for the Hartford Insurance Group, Director of Community Relations and Development for the UC Irvine Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, UCI Mind, a consultant for Alzheimer's Care Associates, and principal for Care Management for Older Adults, LLC. Ms. Bailey is dedicated to serving the needs of our older adult community and is passionate about assisting individuals and families affected by memory loss. She holds a Master's of Science degree in gerontology and a BA in sociology with a minor in human services, both from California State University Fullerton, and it's my great pleasure to work with her here at Alzheimer's Orange County as well. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Kim.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Melissa, for that great introduction. And I don't want you to go too far away because this is such an important topic, and as Director of Education, you have a lot of expertise to share with our group as well, so I may ask you to step in or to flesh out some of the information that I'm giving. So hopefully we'll be able to team a little bit on that, although I know you're taking care of everybody on the webinar. We've got a lot of folks today, one of our bigger groups of attendees, and I wanted to mention that I was looking through the registration list and I noticed that we have, in addition to our sponsors with us today, who I appreciate so much, we've got lots of folks from community agencies in Orange County as well as other areas. And then I also noticed we have lots of folks attending today who represent organizations that are working with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so we welcome all of you as well. And a lot of the information that I'm going to share today, it's ostensibly for Alzheimer's and other types of memory impairments, but it has a very nice application for the IDD population and some of the issues that you have there. So happy to have you on board today and ready to get underway. Before I do, let me see if I can back up a slide here. I want to just quickly mention that some of the material that we're using today comes from curricula that was developed through a grant given by the Administration for Community Living and awarded to the collaborators you see on this screen: Alzheimer's Los Angeles, Alzheimer's Association, the Northern California and Northern Nevada chapter, as well as Dr. Gallagher Thompson from Stanford. So let's get underway. And our goals today are really pretty simple. We want to talk about why people who are living with Alzheimer's and other types of memory impairments are showing changes in their behavioral expressions. So sort of the why of it all, and then the what's causing it? What triggers are responsible for some of the challenging situations that we see our individuals that we're caring for displaying? And we want to then talk about, of course, how we can intervene successfully. So how should we respond when someone that we're caring for is in distress. And so, I've worked in this industry for many, many years, and I've seen a lot of different models that have been applied to behavior management. But we'll talk today about the one that was developed by the collaborating partners I just described, and it's called the IDEA model. And I'm very hopeful that it'll be helpful to you in some of the situations that you are all dealing with now. So let's begin by just talking a little bit about quote unquote behavior. And I'll talk about why that word, really puts a negative spin on things. And so, one of our great mentors and authors, Dr. Al Power, he's written several books, but this is a quote from his book, Dementia Beyond Disease. And he says that what is commonly seen as confused or challenging behavior is really compensatory or adaptive behavior by an individual who continues to express agency and purpose in their own unique way. So, just sort of unpacking that a little bit, what we learn in our business is that, communication becomes difficult for people that are living with dementia. And so sometimes the behavior, quote unquote behavior that we see is a means for the person to try and communicate and reach out to us. They're trying to compensate for their disability. And these are individuals, and Dr. Power is very fond of reminding of us that are struggling to maintain their individuality and their self-worth and their identity and their purpose. And so we have to keep that in mind, because I think sometimes when we're talking about behaviors, we see them as inconveniences to us, but they're important means of expression for the individuals that we care for and care about so much. So just the very word behavior really carries a negative connotation. And I always, think it makes it sound like people are being bad and that they need to be punished, and or that they're doing some of these things on purpose, and that they're doing it because they want to annoy us. So when we have that type of thinking around what we're seeing, it leads us to ignore the real causes and the triggers and instead blame the disease. And so on the other side of the screen, are some important reminders. We are, we're looking at it like they're trying to give us a hard time. And in fact, they are having a hard time. So this is really one of my favorite quotes. Keep that in mind going forward. The person with dementia is not giving you a hard time. They are having a hard time. And if you start to turn your thinking around a little bit in that way, I think you'll find that you'll develop a lot more empathy in your approach, and that change in approach is going to make a significant difference. So what we need to do when we're seeing these expressions is to seek out the cause, the root cause of the distress, so that we can attend to whatever the underlying issues are. And by underlying issues, I mean unmet needs. And so, Melissa, is there anything that you would like to add with this? Because I know that you are also a great fan of Dr. Powers.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of times we think in our head, oh, well, what does it matter what we call something, right? We're talking about the same thing. What does it matter if we call it behavior distress? But I think, being a caregiver myself and over the years studying this material, I think our word choices really do impact the way that we respond. And like you said, I think behavior tends to conjure up someone like behaving badly. We rarely use that word in dementia when we're talking about like good behavior, quote unquote, right? It's always kind of like the negative things, which are real and difficult to deal with. And that's why we're all here today. But I think reframing it simply as distress, the person, it kind of reframes in your mind, okay, this person is not trying to give me a hard time. This person is having a hard time. And I think that really makes me and us take a step back and say, instead of kind of responding out of frustration, kind of respond more out of curiosity. Okay, what's really going on here? Is there something I can do to kind of remedy this situation, rather than just kind of throwing my hands up in the air And I know I've been there. I've been in these really challenging and tough situations. And so I definitely get it. But I think when I started to make that shift is when I really started to, um, you know, take it a little bit less personally and kind of
Yeah.
move into more of like a solutions-based focus rather than just kind of like, grinding me down every day. So, but thank you.
Right.
I think what you said is perfect, and I agree completely.
Yeah, and thank you. And I like what you said about taking a step back, because that's actually something that we can all benefit from doing when we see a behavioral expression or some form of distress being played out. There is sort of this rush to intervene sometimes that conveys anxiety and stress to that person and makes things worse. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But, before I move on, just a couple more things that I pulled up that Dr. Powers said that I think are germane to this particular issue. He said, changing our approach can produce more well-being for people living with dementia than any pill that is available today or likely to be available in the near future or foreseeable future. I thought that was good. And then along the same lines, well-being cannot be bottled. It doesn't come in liquid, capsule, or pill form. And the final thing is that he says we create living environments based on our view of the world, our daily needs, and our staffing patterns. And then we expect people whose brains are changing to adapt to them. And when they cannot, we diagnose it as a behavior problem, and we may even end up medicating them. So just lots of things to think about and talk about today. And of course, we're going to avoid the use of medications if at all possible. And we know that we need to change our minds about people whose minds have changed. So all right, so how does having dementia impact changes in behavioral expressions? Well, we already know that dementia is, this sort of umbrella term that describes a whole wide variety of progressive terminal brain impairments which affect memory and thinking. So these brain changes are bound to alter the person's perceptions and their impulse control. So, and then their interpretation of the environment and how others approach them is changing. So I think these words are very key on this slide, because when we are working with folks with dementia, one of the things that we learned the hard way is that we can't change them. And I think a lot of times we try to do that. Family members, try to do it because, they remember their loved one as they have been for many, many years. And when the changes in the brain start, they keep, wanting them, of course, to revert back to their old way of being. And it's impossible. We can't reel people back in and have them behave in a way that, maps to before they had this disease. So if we know we can't change them, there are two things that we can change. One is the environment. Sometimes there's something in the environment that we can alter that can change the trajectory of a behavior expression. And the other thing is approach. And so this is the thing that's kind of hard to get your head around sometimes, because we're working so hard to care for people, and then we don't want to think to ourselves, well, it must be me. Maybe some of these problems are emanating from me. But in reality, the way our loved ones and the way our residents and patients are perceiving us sometimes is about our approach. And so we'll give you some tips on how to change that a little bit too. So, and I'll also say that no matter how many years you do this, you're always going to have difficulties sometimes. This is not an easy subject. And for people who are just starting out, it's sort of frightening thinking about how are we going to, manage all this. And even for the old pros on the line, people that have been in the industry for many years, they will tell you that because all people with dementia are different, and situations come up are all different. approaches differ from person to person, and so it's never easy. It's not an exact science, but we can do the best we can, and we do it with love and compassion and empathy and the tools that we're going to talk about today. So I have great faith in everyone to be able to benefit from that. But still talking about, how dementia impacts changes. Obviously, when a person is diagnosed with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, they're presenting symptom is memory loss, short term, not long term. They remember everything from years ago, but they're having trouble remembering what they did this morning, or if they had lunch, or that they were just at the doctor's. So it's that memory loss that most people in the general public are aware of. But what they're not aware of is that it's so much more than just memory loss. As the disease begins to move through different areas of the brain, it has an impact on those domains. So we're going to see changes in language and communication. Hence, we'll sometimes see some acting out because traditional channels of communication are closed off. We'll see changes in executive functions. So what do I mean by executive functions? It always sounds more complicated than it is. I'm really just talking about the ability for individuals to plan and carry out tasks from start to finish. Generally speaking, things that they've always done without even thinking about it, but now everything is complex. So it could be anything from cooking, using a recipe, or following a shopping list, or just any organizational task. And because people falter in this area, you often see a lot of frustration. We talk about people sort of losing their initiative and their ability to initiate tasks. So we might see some frustration and sadness around those losses. And then just misperceptions of their environment because of the deficits that they are experiencing in their visual spatial perception and all their other sensory information. So just if you're not already aware of this, be aware that people with dementia are going to have increasing difficulties around all of their senses: vision, hearing, taste, smell, touch, all of those things. But the visual spatial really can produce some behavioral expression. So you might see, a person that's looking out the window and they think they see someone in the bushes. And that's because the sun's going down. They're experiencing symptoms that we call sundown syndrome. And because their visual spatial is altered, they are seeing things that are not really there, and that's causing them a lot of distress. So therefore, when I talk about things like how can we change the environment, in that example I just gave you, if you think about it, it could be fairly simple to employ an intervention like just closing the drapes or closing the blinds so that they can no longer see out at that time of day when everything is changing. So anyway, but all this to say that between memory, language, communication, executive functions, and visual spatial problems and deficits, those changes are going to result in the fact that behavior, quote unquote behavior, isn't really a choice, but it's really an expression of communication. So just step back, as Melissa said, step back and just put yourself in their shoes for a moment. And if you had all of those changes going on in the brain, you're experiencing lots of changes in all of the areas you see on the screen. I think that, well, I'll just speak for myself. I mean, it would, I'm sure, result in my frustration spilling over, maybe anger, lots of behavior that's not typical of my general personality. So it's a way to communicate. So, this is just a little bit of a laundry list of the different types of expressions that we see. agitation, getting lost, delusions, repetition, sleep cycle changes, paranoia. Um, so there's probably a lot of things that are missing from this list. Or you may be looking at this list and thinking, well, the person I'm caring for doesn't do those things, not all of those things. So, again, it's important to keep in mind that all individuals living with dementia go through their illness in their own way and in their own time. So you may or may not see these behavioral expressions. But when you do, our goal today is to give you these tools that can help you to handle it better. So, one of the things that we say over and over again is that all behavioral expressions have meaning. So again, they're not just like waking up in the morning and saying, how can I make life hell for the person that's caring for me? That's not what's happening here. They are trying to explain to you or communicate with you some type of situation that's unfolding. So there's tons of possible meanings. It could be an emotional trigger. They could be feeling sad or angry, or maybe they're fearful. It could be something physical. Maybe they're in pain or they're uncomfortable for some reason. Maybe they're sick and they're not able to tell you. It could be something like they're just frustrated, trying to do something that's too complex. Or on the other hand, they may be just sitting there in front of the television. They can't really understand what's going on and they're just bored. So in all these cases, it's really possible that they're trying to communicate with us, but they're not able to find the right words. Or their emotions are just sort of leading the way instead of their words. So Melissa, do you want to add anything to that before I sort of focus on sudden changes? Anything else you might add to that?
I think you're on a roll. I'd say
Oh,
go forth. We'll
okay.
have time to chat a little later.
Okay, Melissa. So just sort of a caveat here. I want to alert you to watch for sudden changes in behavior expression, because that is not the way it usually works when we're caring for individuals who are living with a memory impairment. Behaviors usually come on gradually, and when we see a sudden behavior, that triggers for me the thought of some type of a change. So when we see a major change in memory or mood, or maybe increased confusion, maybe now this person is hitting or striking out or yelling. They may have wet the bed, which was uncharacteristic of them, or maybe they've got a fever, maybe you've seen a seizure. Anyway, all of these things can point to a dangerous situation, potentially. So we want to treat this like it's a medical issue. They can't say to you, you know what, I think I'm coming down with COVID. I'm not feeling like myself. Maybe I should go to the doctor. They're not able to do that. So we have to be their guardians in every sense of the word and bring in medical intervention immediately. And the thing that, of course, I'm thinking of that we see so much of are urinary tract infections. So, they're very common in our population, and they may be going on for a long time before the person starts to show signs, and those signs might just involve, aggression. So we want to really watch for that. I want to share a story. This is from a long time ago, and so I'm hoping that these kinds of things don't happen anymore. But there was a man who was living in a boarding care home, and he suddenly started getting up a lot at night and showing a lot of restlessness. And so the staff kept trying to, put him back to bed. And every time they did that, he got more upset. And so eventually they ended up sending him to a geropsych unit, where they actually medicated, gave him some psychotropic medications to address his sudden aggression and the fact that he was suddenly getting up in the middle of the night. So it was this, this is such a terrible story. In the middle of his treatment, he actually fell at the geropsych and broke his hip. So he ended up in a skilled nursing facility. He wasn't able to go back to the boarding care. And the moral of this story is that the thing that was discovered finally is that this gentleman had congestive heart failure. So, and when you have congestive heart failure, a lot of times you can't sleep when you're lying flat. And so this was contributing, of course, to his restlessness. This is why he was getting up. It's why he was uncomfortable and not sleeping well at night, because he couldn't breathe. And so what was a physical problem was treated as a psychological, a problem, and had very poor outcomes for him in terms of his, living arrangement and his well-being, all of that. So that's sort of a severe example, and I just wanted to share that with you because I want you to understand the importance really of monitoring for these sudden changes that could be medical in nature, and not to leap to, this person's acting out when, in fact, they're trying to signal a medical change. So watch for medical changes, okay? So we want to share a model with you that was developed by the folks that I spoke about at the beginning of our lecture today, the folks from Northern California Alzheimer's Association chapter, as well as our colleagues here at Alzheimer's Los Angeles. And I think a couple of them are on the line with us today. So thank you for this wonderful model that was developed out of your group. And it's called the IDEA model. And it's really a three-part approach. And we'll go through that for you. So there are 3 steps, and we'll break each one of them down. One is I, or ID, for identifying the behavior expression that you're seeing in a very specific way. So we want to take note of what's happening. And then 2, E stands for exploring, trying to understand the meaning of this behavior expression, get underneath the cause of it. It calls upon us to be a bit of a private detective, but here we're looking for triggers for the behavior. And then we want to, of course, make an adjustment and intervene. And after we use our intervention, we want to stand back and see, how did we do? Is there a way we could have enhanced that, or how did things go, and what was the outcome? So yeah, so identification, can you describe the behavior expression? Do others in your group or family see it the same way? Does it bother everybody or just you? That's kind of an interesting question, because in all things dementia, changing a behavior has got to be one of the hardest things. And so sometimes we have to just assess and say, what is this person doing? And is it something that places them in harm's way or you in harm's way? And if the answer is no, sometimes we have to just let it be. So identification, the important first step. And then step 2, E, for exploration of why it's happening. So what is the meaning to the person? Whatever they're seeing or hearing or experiencing, what does that mean to them? And how are they, what are they trying to say or do in reaction to that situation? 3 is where we're going to go back to what I said earlier. We can't change them, but luckily we can change the environment or whatever outside influence we're dealing with. And we can change ourselves, our approach, our attitude, etc. So I want to talk about that, but Melissa, remind me just to talk about approach at some point, but I don't want to interrupt the flow of the talk right now, but remind me to talk about that approach, okay? Okay, so we adjust because they cannot, but we can. And in a lot of cases, and I alluded to this already, our response as caregivers has the biggest impact on the behavior expressions. It can actually make things a lot worse, and we can get ourselves into this cycle of distress. So this is a very simple schematic here. And you start with the fact that the person you're caring for is distressed for some unknown reason. So that may be stressing you out. They're observing your temperature rising, so to speak. You're getting frustrated. So that then in turn elevates their distress. And it's cyclical. And so we want to avoid that, getting into that trap.
And Kim, I
But
will remind you to talk about the approach.
okay, maybe I should do that right now.
Sure.
I think a lot of you have taken one of our communication classes, or sort of already, you may already know this, but it's worth reminding you that our approach has to be, we have to approach people in a non-threatening way, obviously. And so what that means is we want to approach from the front, and we want to have great body language and a great expression, so that we don't need to use words to reassure that person that they can trust us. We want to try to, have this atmosphere of trust. And so as I'm approaching someone who's experiencing a behavioral expression, I'm going to apply, well, first of all, I'm going to move very slowly, and I'm not going to violate their personal space. But again, I'm going to try to smile. I might lower myself to look at them eye level. I'm going to just use very few words, excuse me, but empathetic gestures, and try to really bring that temperature down. So when we rush around and say, "Why are you doing that?" or "What? Stop!" that makes the person feel threatened. They don't understand why we're yelling. I mean, even when we're not yelling, they may perceive it as yelling. And so, and unwittingly, it's going to escalate that behavioral expression. So we really want to, this is, sort of looking at this last bullet on putting idea to work. We want to respond in a thoughtful way that is decelerating the situation, not accelerating it. So when you see an expression unfolding, and we're going to give you some great examples next, we want to assess what's happening, identify what's happening, what could be causing it. So we're going to get underneath the reason, because we know now that behaviors don't just happen. There's some type of hidden meaning or agenda. What does it mean to the person, and how are we going to respond? So here is, I'm going to actually go through a couple of different case examples, and I want to mention that these are all taken from a wonderful library of videos that were developed at UCLA. And you can look, you see the website on your slide. You can look these up, and there's a whole laundry list of behavioral expressions and case examples of how to intervene using the idea model. So I want to encourage all of you to use that as it's a wonderful resource, and there are handouts that accompany the videos, and it's just a great learning, to scroll through some of these. But let's start with repetitive questions. And it's so interesting, because before I was a caregiver myself, I always thought that this was the least offensive, not that offensive is the word I would use, but the least troubling behavior. I thought, so they repeat, big deal, but when I then became a personal home caregiver for a number of years, I learned that this can be very frustrating to the caregiver. And I think you all know what I'm talking about here. But in this scenario, we've got an older woman who is living with dementia, and she is asking her granddaughter, Stacy, over and over again, what time they are attending a party. The granddaughter has told her, the details of the party, keeping them brief, but she's becoming very frustrated because her grandmother is asking over and over again. So here's a typical reaction, when she asks for the 14th time, what time is the party? Granddaughter is saying, Why aren't you listening to me? I just told you that. I need to wrap this gift. Why do you keep asking me when the party is? So if this is you, don't beat yourself up because it's a natural human reaction, to react, to get upset and frustrated when somebody's asking the same question over and over again. But let's put the idea model to work and see how we might address this in a way that's a little different than just, expressing frustration at grandmother. So first we want to identify the behavior expression, and specifically it is that grandma is repeating and asking constantly what time the party is. So in exploring this expression, what could be causing that? Let's get underneath that behavior and find out what's triggering it. Could be several things. She might be feeling a lack of control. So she knows she's supposed to go somewhere maybe, and she's not sure where it is and what time it is, and doesn't know if she's ready to go. So feeling, just sort of a lack of control. Imagine you as a working professional, if someone took your Google Calendar away or your day planner away, and how that would feel all of a sudden to not know where, what you were supposed to be doing. She might just have a need for connection. If we saw granddaughter is busy wrapping a gift and grandma is just kind of sitting there idle. So, maybe she's just trying to reach out to her granddaughter. And she might be feeling anxious. And you might think of some other reasons for the behavioral expression. And I'll add that, when we see repetition, people aren't doing, again, they're not doing that on purpose. They're not aware that they're asking over and over again, and it really maps to the changes in their brain and nothing that they are personally responsible for. So it's not their fault. So we want to adjust. What can be done? So here are some suggestions. She could try to calmly reassure the person. And, one way to deal with this is just to keep answering the question in the same way and with using the same words. Grandma, the party is at 4 o'clock, for example. You might consider a calendar or a whiteboard. There you see grandmother has her schedule up and it's visible to her at all times, so she can constantly check that and perhaps as a result feel reassured. You could avoid telling them about the party, or as the case may be, the doctor appointment or whatever event or appointment is going on. Wait, don't tell them too early. You can avoid all that repetition by telling them much closer to the event. What else can we do? We can we can adjust our own approach. We have to convey patience. We're human, so sometimes we're going to feel frustrated, but we don't want to let that frustration show, because remember, we can get caught up then in that cycle of frustration with the loved one. So be patient, because your mood is going to influence theirs. And then, try to plan ahead so that you can avoid rushing, or even worse, rushing the person to get ready. So, when you're caring for someone with dementia, I know from my own caregiving experience, it took an hour to leave the house. I mean, even if the person I was caring for was dressed, she wanted to look for her bag all the time, which she could never find. She wanted to use the restroom, which took extra amount of time. She wanted, where's my lipstick? I mean, she would not leave the house without her lipstick, which I totally relate to. So, I learned early on to front load with a lot of extra time so that you don't have to rush the person. When you're rushing someone with dementia, you are going to see a behavioral expression. So there are some ideas, and you may have some ideas as well. Here's another quote that is germane to this discussion. Here we're looking at this excerpt was from a book that was written by Christine Bryden, who is living with dementia. And she said, I feel I have to do something, but I can't remember what. And often it feels like something terrible is going to happen, but I've forgotten what it is. Imagine feeling that way. With the stress of many activities at once, I become very focused, trying with all the brain I have left to concentrate. Telling me to rest won't help, but helping me to complete the task will. So I think these words are terribly important. If you really think about this from the perspective of the people you're caring for, a little more insight here about what they're feeling, what they're experiencing can certainly help us when we are trying to manage with these expressions that we're seeing. So a couple more examples. Repetitive tapping. Okay, that sounds a little crazy making, right? So we've got Jane, who is the daughter and the caregiver, and she says that her father used to be active, but now he just sits in his chair, constantly tapping his hands. Okay, so that's not good, right? So we want to use our IDEA model. Remember, it's identify the behavior, explore, and then adjust. So let's see. How does she handle it? Dad, stop that tapping. It's really annoying. Just sit there and watch TV. Okay, that is not the approach that we want to use. But caregivers are tired. Caregivers are desperately trying to manage a lot of multiple responsibilities. So they're human. They may blow up like this. It happens. And I know it certainly happened to me. But let's look at a different way to do this using the IDEA model. So think about what you're seeing. That's the ID part. What may be causing the behavior expression? We're going to explore. And then what does that mean to the person? And finally, the A is for adjust. How would we respond? Okay, so the behavior, we know what it is. It's that constant tapping. What's causing it? Well, when people with dementia keep repeating words or gestures, it may be a way, it's self-soothing. And I've seen a lot of this, in different care settings where people don't have enough activity, so they may be compulsively humming or compulsively drumming or some kind of self-stimulation, and that is, we need to replace that, right, with a meaningful type of activity. They're trying to communicate an unmet need. That could be that they're bored or that they don't feel well, or maybe they need to use the restroom. We need to assess. They just could have pent up energy with no place to, kind of let that out or vent it, or they may be in physical discomfort. So there's a whole range of things that we can explore, and we've got to do that quickly, right? Using our expertise and what we know about the folks that we're caring for. And then what can be done? So we're trying to figure out the underlying cause. We want to provide validation and reassurance always. We want to change up the environment. What does that environment look like? It looks like he's just kind of sitting there, right? Sitting on the couch. Okay. Substitute an activity the person can engage in. So let me pause for a moment. I'll just introduce the concept of contented involvement. We've talked about it in other webinars. And what contented involvement is all about is finding some type of simple activity that brings comfort to the person we're caring for. Because in our dementia world, we know that if people are overstimulated, you may see behavior expressions, but you're also seeing them when they're understimulated. So dad is just sitting there. So maybe we need to use one of our go-to activities that we know he likes, and it might involve just putting something in his hand, maybe some papers to sort through, some towels to fold, an object that is important to him. I don't know, maybe dad was a veteran, and so we have a medal. We can put it in his hands and say, tell me about this. So we could use music And we mentioned that here on this slide because we know that works kind of universally for people in all stages of memory impairment. So, and then finally, as I mentioned before, think about whether we can just let the action continue. If it's not hurting him, it's not hurting you. I mean, we will resign ourselves to it. So if it's not a source of disruption or if no one's at risk, ask yourself, can I just let this continue? So these are great examples. And again, they're highlighted in this video series that we are promoting, the UCLA Caregiver Video Series online at the address you see on your slide. So what about wanting to leave? Do we see that? We see that a lot, don't we? All right, so wandering or wanting to go home. So here we have Jane, who is the daughter and the primary caregiver, and she finds her father just about to leave the house, and he's saying, I need to go home. All right. So sometimes this is what happens. She firmly grabbed her father's arm and said, please stop. This is your home. Now, for all of you sitting out there on this webinar, I know what you're thinking. That is not the approach that we want to use, right? If in the beginning, with less experience, we might think this is the ideal way to handle this, but let's look at another approach using the idea model. So what is the idea? Let's ID the behavior expression. It's that Jane's father is trying to leave the house. And of course, this could become dangerous. So we need to handle this in the best way possible. So first we need to look at what could be causing that behavior. Well, he may not know where he is. The woman who I cared for in the last 2 years of her life didn't think she was living in her home. And so she wanted to go to her home. And in her case, she thought it was another house on the same street. So she was wanting to leave and go over there. So they don't always realize where they are. He could have been reliving an old memory. He could be feeling distress. Maybe where he is doesn't feel like home. Everything looks different in this illness. Or he could have been triggered because maybe there were keys in a purse or a jacket by the door. Let's look and see. I don't remember. Oh yeah, there's the purse and he's got his jacket in hand. So those are all, sort of indicators to someone that maybe they need to leave. All right, so the last letter is A for adjust. What can be done? So first of all, again, we want to approach calmly and provide reassurance. We're not going to grab him by the arm like the daughter did. We want to ask them where they're going politely or what they need. Hi, Dad, where are you off to? See if you can redirect the person to a new place or activity. So when the person I cared for wanted to leave and go to her real home, I'd say, that's a great idea, but right now it's time for dinner. So we can go after dinner. You learn not to say no, because no is a trigger for acceleration of a behavior expression. You want to validate and reassure. Yep, that's a great idea. But first, we need to set the table. Just some type of redirection, some type of activity. Do remove, and this is where we tweak the environment, remove items that signal leaving from the front door area. And I know a lot of folks have to go even beyond that. They have to disguise the front door. Some people put a screen up, or they might put a curtain over the door for someone who's always trying to leave. They can put a stop sign on the door. There are different things that you can do to the environment to decelerate this behavior. And then also, make sure the person's getting enough exercise. If they're living at home, they should be getting walks. If they may need to go to an adult day center, they may not have enough activity in their life. So if they're in a day center during the day, then when they get home at night, they're going to be tired, less likely to want to leave, that sort of thing. All right, So these were just a couple of cases, and I don't know, Melissa, do you want to add anything about the cases? Always
I
want to
think
defer
let's
to
wait till
you
question
because
and
you've had
answer
so much.
time.
Oh, okay. All
Why
right.
don't we go ahead and wrap up, and then we have a few questions and we can talk through these a little bit more too.
Absolutely. So some final considerations. It's better to be proactive than reactive. And so when we deliver person-centered care, that means we know the person well, our loved one or our residents, and we understand their needs and what might trigger them. Talk to others on your care team, whether it be family or friends or other professionals, so that everybody's on the same page with how and why, this behavior expression is occurring and what we can do to assist with that. And then always, always, always try to see things through the person's point of view. All right. So before we end, just want to say that I can't emphasize this enough. There's a lot of power in taking some deep breaths, some deep cleansing breaths. So when you're feeling overwhelmed as a caregiver, just step back and inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And you might want to do that several times just to center yourself. And if you're a caregiver, you can always use this tool to bring your own level of frustration down. Again, here are those resources I was talking about, the video library with all of those different behavioral expressions focused on. Don't forget that you can call our helpline with problems that you're experiencing with residents or family members and issues around behavior expressions, or just to get information and support or referrals. And there is our website, www.alzoc.org, to learn more about the types of opportunities that are available, other education, etc. So with that, I guess it's time for our Q&A, right?
Absolutely. And as you said, we're running right on the dot here. It's almost 12:30. So we'll definitely stay on for about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how many questions come in. I know that some people like to say, why don't you end right on time? But you are free to leave if you've been online for 60 minutes and you're looking for continuing education credit. As a reminder, that survey will be emailed to you. And if you're worried about missing any questions and you need to go, we record all of these webinars in their entirety with the questions. And they are available in about a week on our website and our YouTube page. On our website, if you go to alzoc.org and search for where it says for professionals, you'll see all of our webinars there. And so we've had a few questions about that. So I want to make sure people know that we definitely do record these and they are available for you to watch anytime. You can't get CE credit for watching them when they're not live, but you can watch them, or share them with folks as well. And so thank you, Kim, for this presentation. Continue to type in your questions. If we don't get to them right now, we'll shoot you an email, or feel free to call our helpline, as Kim has mentioned. It's on this slide. I've directed a couple people there already who had very specific questions about a case, and I think it just doesn't do it justice sometimes when we talk about it here. You want to really talk that through with somebody who can give you that full kind of conversation and one-on-one attention. We have amazing social workers and helpline specialists. When you call, if you have to leave a voicemail, you will get a call back. So please do leave us that voicemail with your name and number. And you can call about anything, any questions, any need for information or referrals. We love hearing from you. We love serving our community. So please, please call our helpline and share that number with anyone who would benefit from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so one more time, I just want to thank these wonderful sponsors: O'Connor Mortuary,
Yes.
Care Choices Hospice and Palliative Services, and Caring Companions at Home. They've been sponsors for a long time. We value their work in the community so much, and we're so proud to be connected with them and community partners with them. And some of you may have known this webinar filled up very fast. And actually, reached its capacity. So if you're interested in our webinars, please sign up for them as soon as you can. Our webinar next month, actually, I'll be presenting, so you'll see Kim and I again, the Kim and Melissa show. Our roles will be flipped, but we'll both be here. I'll be talking about personal care with positivity, helping individuals with dementia with their ADLs, activities of daily living. And I'm so excited to present that topic next month. So we hope that you can join us for that. All right, with that, let's get to a few questions here. We had a couple early in the webinar that I just wanted to touch on. Somebody asked if you could give an example using the IDEA model for someone refusing to take medications. And we've done this example in the past, and UCLA has a great video on it. But Kim, off the top of your head, can you think of a few things for this
Yeah.
example?
Yeah, I remember that video well because the person with dementia, the grandmother, actually slapped the medications out of her granddaughter's hands when she was offering the medications. So it's pretty profound. But some of the things that we looked at was her approach. She was standing above grandmother and kind of bearing down on her and very authoritarian, perhaps looking to her grandmother. She was frustrated and, her voice reflected that. So the body language and approach were kind of all wrong. One of the things that we looked at when we were exploring through the IDEA model is that we could actually say the doctor says you need to take these medications. And so this is a great approach, shifting the responsibility or blame to someone else. If your resident says, why do I have to take this medicine? There's nothing wrong with me. You can reply by saying the doctor says. Sometimes you can even show them a note that says you need to take this medication for your blood pressure, signed Dr. So-and-so. So having a visual can be good. I don't know, Melissa, was there anything else? Sitting side by side with the person, making sure
Yeah, I
they
mean,
take,
so many
go
things
ahead.
and so dependent on figuring out the why. Is it
Yeah.
because they don't feel that control over and they just kind of want to be like, no, I don't feel in control of this. And maybe it's giving them control in as many other ways throughout their day as possible so that they don't feel like that kind of cup is just empty by the time you're, trying to get them to take medication. They're like, you're making decisions for everything about me, and this is a way that I can kind of exert some control. So it could be that. It could be, so many things. And if they have a lot of medication to take, it's very important to give the most important pills first, right? So that we don't
Mm-hmm.
risk, them taking a few and then being like, I don't want to take these. So if it's like a multivitamin, maybe we save that for last if it's not as important as like a blood pressure medication. But yeah, I definitely encourage watching that video, the UCLA
Yeah.
video, because it's very good.
Some of the
Another,
medications can
oh yeah,
also be crushed if you have to
yeah,
ask the pharmacist or the doctor, but sometimes you can put them in the food. That
definitely talk
works
to the
as well
pharmacist
at
about
home.
that.
Yeah, especially.
Absolutely.
Okay, next question.
Um, yeah, we're just going to roll right through. Another question here. How do you encourage someone who does not want to take a shower unless they get reminded? And I want to do a plug again for the webinar next month that I'm going to be
Yep.
doing, because I'm going to be talking about bathing a lot, and we'll go in depth with that. But Kim, anything, again, just kind of some brief tips here with showering, bathing.
Yeah. They're usually afraid. People don't always like the sensation of the water. They may perceive it as the bathroom as a dangerous place. There's all kinds of reasons why they're kind of adverse to taking a shower, but if you set the environment up for success, maybe have some music on, make sure the room is warm, move very slowly with the person, remove, pieces of clothing one at a time, protect their modesty. If you use a shower bench or shower seat, you have a handheld shower, having them hold the shower, kind of makes them feel more in control. Yeah, there's lots, and I know, Melissa, you're going to hit on this, as you said, next month when you talk about the ADL. So, and we also, the helpline is going to be the go-to for all of these questions that are being asked, because they have fact sheets on all of the different behavior expressions with lots of helpful tips, etc. But those were just a few that I hope will be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much in each of these topics, and it really is person dependent. So we give you kind of, a huge toolbox, hopefully, of lots of strategies you can try, and they're not all going to work, and some might work on some day and not work on another day. The name of the game is definitely flexibility in dementia care and just rolling with, the punches, so to
Right.
speak. And so,
And
it's
not taking it personally when things don't go well, because
exactly.
they don't always. Right.
Yeah, I think a
So,
huge thing is something I wanted to mention earlier, just the power of an apology, of saying, I'm sorry, and even if it's not your fault, it's likely not your fault. But just, when frustration is kind of getting to this, tipping point, and things are heating up, just hey, I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry. I can see that you're frustrated. I'm so sorry. I didn't tell you about X, Y, or Z, even though you told them all day long. It can really just disarm a situation. And I think a lot of
Absolutely.
times we can be resistant to do that because it's not our fault, and why is this happening? And this is, kind of, it feels like an unfair situation, and it is. But that it just, what is your goal? Is your goal to kind of, calm the situation down, calm the person down, get back to a positive place, then saying I'm sorry in many, many forms, many, many times, and giving lots of compliments. Those two things can just be, an easy way to just calm things down.
Amen.
So yeah, that's definitely been helpful for me. Um, this is an
Absolutely.
interesting question, and again, highly dependent on the person, obviously. But someone asked, "Is touch more effective than verbal directions?"
I think it is. If the person enjoys touch, I mean, you have to really know this is person-centered care. You have to know how people feel about that. I feel like a touch on the arm or motoring someone, with your hands can really be more effective than giving verbal directions sometimes. And so, but just keep that touch light, make sure they see you coming. Don't, like come up and hug someone from behind or, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think touch is, I personally think is very effective as long as it's okay with the person.
Yeah, I think it's huge to be able
Gestures,
to.
prompts, think,
Mm,
all of that. It's nonverbal communication. Yeah.
Yeah, to be able to read somebody's body language and then, respond appropriately. I love Teepa Snow. She says, if you're going to get in someone's personal space, like we're talking pretty close, close enough to hold their hand, things like that, it either requires an invitation or an explanation. So, don't just
Yeah,
hop right in there. Unless you're, that person's very comfortable with you. Like if I cared for my mom and she was very comfortable, I would come up and give her a hug. She would never, refuse that. But especially for professionals or others who may not have that type of relationship, hey, coming in, introducing yourself, can I X, Y, or Z, or if the person is asking. So just be mindful that, it is their
absolutely.
personal space and they have a right to kind of refuse you being there. So,
Yeah.
but touch can be so powerful. I agree. Maybe we'll end on this one because I think this kind of sums up a lot of emotions and feelings that can happen with caregiving. And I think the question got cut off, but I think the gist of it is, I'm assuming the person you're caring for, keeps telling me I'm not a baby.
Mhm.
So, just
Yeah.
can you talk to the emotions there and what we can kind of maybe how we can address that?
Right. So, there's a temptation to do a lot of that sort of thing, like treat the person as if they're a child. And we want to make sure we're maintaining um, everyone's dignity at all times because, I mean, if you just look at that person and see an older person with dementia, then you're missing out on all the insight that can help guide your actions with that person. Instead, you want to look at that person and say, all right, this lady is in my care. She was a social worker all her life. She also sang in a choir and she raised a family and she went and got, multiple degrees. So, in other words, thinking about that person in terms of their whole life and not just this part of their life, and embracing sort of who they are and what they've done in their lifetime. That if you keep that top of mind, then you're going to treat everybody with dignity and respect. And it's just the way you would want to be treated if you were in that situation. So that's sort of my perspective on that. I don't know if you want to add anything, Melissa.
No, I think that's great. I think, yeah, it's challenging, as a caregiver. And I think, again, that I'm sorry can go a long way here. If somebody says that, I'm so sorry that I made you feel that way. I love
Absolutely.
you, and I just want to do whatever you need, and just lay it on thick. And, it can really disarm a challenging situation. So, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. We still had some questions that didn't get answered, and I really encourage you to reach out to our helpline. It's not scary. Our people are wonderful there. and they would love to talk through these personal situations with you. We look forward to seeing you all next time, and with that, we bid you adieu. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Melissa, and thanks everyone for participating today. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.